Mark, the regional news said today that in 2010 there were 4 food banks in the West Midlands, but there are now 41. That's a huge growth. Why is that?
Well, the main thing that is different between 2009, if you like, and 2010 is that prior to 2010, the Job Centre Pluses were not allowed to refer people to food banks, and we decided that was a bad thing. We thought that the Job Centre Pluses were specifically the organisations that see the most poverty, the most trouble that people have, and so we decided it was a good idea that they should refer to people to those food banks. So that's the main impetus. But look, Eva, there's a lot of things that are going on, and we need to understand what's happening within this kind of whole food bank thing. And there was a report that was written by some colleagues who went in to go and try and investigate what was happening. And there are a number of issues that are happening. And I think it's important that we stand up and say that things like benefit sanctions are having an effect on people. There's no doubt about it. If you bring in a benefit sanction, that can put people over the edge where they need to go to a food bank. Similarly, we have another situation where people, for example, are on free school meals. When their kids are in school during the term time, they get free school meals. When they come home for the holidays, you now have a bit of a problem. We have 3 banks in Wyre Forest plus an organisation that provides hot meals for children during the school holidays. And that's something which has an effect. You also have the fact the cost of living has gone up. I mean, the fact fuel prices have gone up, and they've come down again, but fuel prices have gone up, and it is more difficult for people to live. Inflation has now dropped down. We have to go through this period of austerity. There's no doubt about it. There's some people, living standards for some people have been squeezed, not for everybody, but for some people have been squeezed. So there's a number of different factors that are going on which are contributing to this. I think also to a certain extent, I think now that we've seen, people coming forward, there is a movement where people feel that this is something they can do. And I think this is a side of it, which is something which, in some respects, I'm proud of. This is a Christian country, and we're seeing people who are prepared to open these food banks. The Trussell Trust has been very successful in helping people get them started. So there's something which is now sort of, if you like, gathering a bit of momentum. And I think where there is demand, genuine demand for them, I think they're I would wish there was never any demand for them, because I wish we could support everybody. But if there is, I think it's a sign that we have an old-fashioned Christian society where people come forward and help other people.
Can I be honest and say that quite a lot of people in my church are quite angry about this issue? I mean, whatever political colour they may be, or wherever they're coming from, they are indeed motivated out of their absolute Christian compassion to be the people who are mostly putting the food in the food banks and running the food banks. But that is a quite significant personal cost. I mean, not only are they not on particularly high incomes themselves, and then propping up the church, giving a lot to charity, volunteering left, right and centre, but when they go shopping, they're also having to pay for somebody else's shopping. Is that fair in the 5th richest economy?
I think people's personal choices about whether they're going to give to charity or not is something for them. But I think there's a point which I possibly can talk wider on, and that is the contribution that can be made by, say, for example, the supermarkets, the food companies, and all the rest of it. We've certainly seen, for example, in London, many, many years ago, Pret-a-Manger, sandwich stores in London, at the end of the day, they would take their sandwiches left over and hand those out to homeless people. And that was, I think, something which was, if you like, a very early form of food bank, where you had intelligent thinking by a corporate. I think that, certainly we see local stores will give food to not only food banks, but also to breakfast clubs. There's 1 or 2 schools where we have breakfast clubs in Wyre Forest, and they are trying to help. I've also worked on a couple of occasions within Tesco's, where they do collections for food banks there from people in their shopping, and I've been there and I've seen people who are very keen to give to food banks. But look, it's right. I mean, quite often with a lot of charity, and it doesn't matter whether it's food banks or indeed any other charity, is you have certain people who are very, very kind and Christian spirited and thoughtful, and they're very they have a great conscience about contributing to people who are in a worse off position themselves. And other people, are the sort of people when they tins rattle them on the street, they sort of say, no, don't worry, I've given at the office, sort of thing, and get away from it. It's an interesting one, but it's a question that comes back to something
But
like...
in an ideal world, would that provision not come from the state and not from the pockets of volunteers?
Well, I mean, that's a quite a big technical question, because bear in mind that our work and pensions budget is £200 billion a year, and that is money which is being given to people who need help. But they need more help. And can the state give absolutely everything? Possibly it could do. I mean, but the state is giving free, £113 billion worth of, it's not free actually because we're paying for it, but £113 billion worth of health provision for people free at the point of use. That's where the state is certainly stepping in. £39 billion a year of education for people. One of the things that can make the biggest difference to people's lives. As I said, £200 billion a year for the work and pension budget. Now, the state is doing a lot at the margins. Of course, the question is, should the state be doing more or should the state be doing less? Should people try to be encouraged to get onto their own 2 feet? What's happening behind this? But I would say one thing that I think is important about charities, actually, and it's not just specifically food banks, it is charities in general, and I do a lot with a number of charities throughout Wyre Forest, Kemp Hospice, the youth house up in Kidderminster with Wyre Forest Night Support, that type of thing, is the action of a charity charitable action is something that actually brings communities together. There is, I've often said that the one thing that makes, I think, Kidderminster is when you have 200 people dressed up as Father Christmas running through the centre of town, raising money for Kemp Hospice. Charitable donation gives people the opportunity to come together and help their communities in a way where they feel they're making a contribution. So look, I wouldn't want to rely on charities instead of state, but I would never want to stop charities being able to allow people to make a contribution, because I think our society is stronger because we have charities, not despite the fact we need them.